Sadio Mané had just landed in Bambali, his hometown in Senegal. Despite all his achievements in European football, he never forgot where he came from. Whenever he could, he returned to visit his family, reconnect with childhood friends, and give back to the community that raised him. The scent of the nearby river, the dust from the dirt roads, and the laughter of children playing football barefoot were vivid memories in his mind. This time, Mané decided to take a walk alone through the village streets. No security, no announcements. He liked feeling the warmth of his people without formalities or ceremonies. As he walked, he greeted the locals who recognized him, smiling as some waved with pride and admiration. Along the way, he passed by a dirt field where a group of boys was playing football with a makeshift ball made of socks and plastic. He stopped for a moment. It reminded him of when he was just a boy with a dream too big for his reality. He too played like that, barefoot, feeling the hot ground beneath his feet. And it was there, on that very field, that a friend unknowingly changed his life. His name was Bakari. At the time, he was one of the few boys who had a pair of football boots, even if they were old and worn out. Knowing Mané's talent and his unshakable desire to play football, Bakari would lend him his boots whenever he could. "Today is your turn to shine, Mané," he would say with a smile. It was a simple gesture, but for Mané, it meant everything. With those borrowed boots, he began to get noticed in local tournaments and took his first steps toward stardom. However, as the years passed and life became busier, Mané lost contact with Bakari. He knew his friend was still in the village, but he had never been able to find him on previous visits. This time, though, fate had other plans. As he walked towards the market, he spotted a man bent over a large sack, collecting aluminum cans to sell. He wore simple, worn-out clothes and looked exhausted under the scorching sun. Mané slowed his pace, observing him. There was something familiar about the way he moved. His heart began to race. "Bakari?" he called hesitantly. The man slowly lifted his head, wiping sweat from his forehead. His face was weathered by time, but those eyes were the same as his childhood friends. "Sadio?" Bakari blinked in surprise before breaking into a wide smile. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. After so many years, there they were, face to face, as if time had curved to bring them back together. Mané felt a mix of joy and sorrow at the sight of his friend. Bakari was no longer the energetic boy who ran across the fields. He was thin, with signs of fatigue, carrying a visible weight on his shoulders. "What happened to you, Bakari?" Mané asked, trying to hide the concern in his voice. Bakari's smile wavered for a moment. He looked down before replying. "My house burned down a few months ago. I lost everything, Mané. Everything I had. Now I do what I can to collect money and rebuild it." Mané felt a tightness in his chest. How could life be so unfair? Bakari, the same friend who had helped him when he had nothing, was now struggling to survive. He looked at his friend with a determined glint in his eyes. He knew exactly what he had to do. The tightness in Mané's chest only grew as he listened to Bakari's story. He couldn't believe that his childhood friend, the one who had once lent him his football boots when he had none, was now struggling to survive, collecting cans just to rebuild his life. "Bakari, I'm so sorry," Mané said sincerely, deeply moved. But Bakari simply smiled, accepting his reality. "That's life, my brother. One day we're doing well, the next we have to start over. I thank God that I'm still alive. Many people go through worse things." Bakari's humility made Mané admire him even more. Even in hardship, he didn't complain. But Mané couldn't just stand by and accept this situation. He had to do something. "Do you have somewhere to sleep?" Mané asked, dreading the answer. Bakari scratched his head, hesitating. "I have a small shelter near the river. Some neighbors help me with food sometimes, but I don't want to be a burden to anyone. That's why I collect cans. I want to rebuild my house with my own effort." Mané felt a lump in his throat. He looked around, taking in the bustling village, the fruit vendors, the children running barefoot through the dusty streets. This was where he grew up, where he learned to dream. And now, here was Bakari, struggling to survive without the safety of a home. "Take me there," Mané said. Bakari hesitated but eventually nodded. He picked up his sack of cans and started walking, with Mané by his side. They followed a dirt path, passing trees and small, simple houses. After a few minutes, they reached a piece of land near the river, where a makeshift shelter stood, built from scraps of wood, plastic sheets, and rusty tin. Inside, there was a worn-out mattress and a few scattered belongings. Mané's heart ached. This was not a home. "You can't live like this, Bakari," he said, looking around. "It's temporary, just until I save enough to start over," Bakari replied, forcing a small smile. Mané remained silent for a moment. He thought about all those times he had worn Bakari's borrowed boots, about how his friend had never hesitated to help him, even when he had little himself. Now it was Mané's turn to return the favor. "Do you remember what you used to say when you lent me your boots?" Mané asked, a nostalgic smile on his face. Bakari chuckled softly. "Of course. Today is your turn to shine, Mané." "And today," Mané continued, "it's yours." Bakari frowned slightly, not fully understanding. "What do you mean?" Mané placed a firm hand on his friend's shoulder. "You don't have to collect cans to rebuild your house, Bakari. I'm going to buy you a new one." Bakari's eyes widened. He shook his head in disbelief. "No, Mané, I can't accept that. I know you have money, but I don't want charity. I want to earn my house through my own effort." Mané smiled, already expecting that response. Bakari had always been proud and hard-working. "I understand. But think of it this way. When I had no boots, you lent me yours. You didn't wait for me to get my own. You helped me take my first step. Now, let me do the same for you." Bakari remained silent. He looked at his small shelter, at the few possessions he had left. His eyes filled with tears. "Mané, I don't even know what to say. Just say yes." For a moment, Bakari struggled with his emotions, but finally he smiled and nodded. "Yes." Mané laughed and pulled him into a tight hug. "Now come with me. We have a house to choose." The next morning, bright and early, Mané and Bakari set out together to visit some properties in the village. Mané had already contacted a trusted local agent who could help them find a good home for Bakari to start fresh. As they walked through the streets of Bambali, people watched curiously. Many recognized Mané and greeted him with admiration, but few understood why he was walking with Bakari, the man who collected cans. They arrived at the first house. It was a simple structure with reinforced mud walls and a new tin roof. There was a small yard with a mango tree in the back and enough space for Bakari to live comfortably. He stepped inside hesitantly, looking around, running his hand over the walls as if trying to convince himself that it was real. "What do you think?" Mané asked. "It's incredible," Bakari murmured, still in disbelief. But Mané wanted more for his friend. He didn't just want Bakari to have shelter, he wanted him to have a real home. So they moved on to another option. This time it was a slightly bigger house, with a larger plot of land where Bakari could even plant crops or raise animals if he wanted. "This one reminds me a bit of my old house," Bakari said, a nostalgic glint in his eyes. Mané smiled. "So this is the one?" Bakari hesitated for a moment. He looked at Mané as if he still couldn't believe that all of this was happening. "Mané, are you sure? This must cost a lot." Mané placed his hands on his friend's shoulders. "My brother, you gave me something that no amount of money can buy. If it weren't for you, for your kindness when we were kids, I might never have made it to where I am today. Now, I'm just giving back." Bakari's eyes welled up. He took a deep breath, trying to hold back his emotions. Then, finally, he smiled. "Yes, I accept." Mané sealed the deal right there, and within days, the house was ready for Bakari to move in. But Mané didn't stop there. He arranged for local workers to renovate the interior, added new furniture, and even bought a small television so Bakari could watch the games and cheer for him. When moving day arrived, Bakari couldn't stop smiling. Neighbors came to help, bringing food and warm wishes. Mané watched everything unfold with satisfaction. He didn't just want to give his friend a house. He wanted to restore his dignity, his hope. That evening, after everyone had left, Bakari and Mané sat in the yard, looking up at the starry sky. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken gratitude. "You know, Mané, I never imagined my life would change like this overnight," Bakari said, absent-mindedly running his fingers through the dirt. "Life has a way of surprising us. One day you helped me, today it was my turn." Bakari smiled, shaking his head. "So I guess we're even now." Mané chuckled. "Maybe, but if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Bakari looked at his new home, took a deep breath, then turned back to his friend. "I don't need anything else now. I'm just grateful." And there, under the Senegalese sky, two childhood friends silently sealed a bond of lifelong friendship.